Study 1 examines national nostalgia in an American context, predicting anti-Latinx immigrant attitudes. So here, 147 white Americans filled out an anonymous survey about beliefs about America. They completed a 6-item national nostalgia scale that was adapted from Smeeks and colleagues, but for an American context, and included statements such as, how much do you miss the way American society was in the past? Now, one of the recurrent themes that we see in white nationalist ideologies is a belief that racial and ethnic minority groups pose a threat to whites' power, resources, and culture. And so what we wanted to examine was anti-immigrant attitudes that reflect both realistic threats as well as symbolic threats. So we had 5 items that measured beliefs that immigrants pose realistic threats to America, and included items such as immigrants are a threat to national security. And we had a scale measuring beliefs that immigrants pose symbolic threats to America, including items such as immigrants' culture dilutes American culture. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to examine whether or not the unique effects of national nostalgia predict realistic and symbolic threats while controlling for ideology. We know that ideology is a strong predictor of immigrant attitudes. And what we find is that even when we control for political ideology, we see that national nostalgia remains a unique and significant predictor of believing that immigrants pose realistic threats to America and Americans. We see the same thing with national nostalgia's relationship with believing that immigrants pose symbolic threats to America. So to summarize study 1, Longing for America's Past predicts beliefs that immigrants pose both realistic and symbolic threats to America above and beyond conservative ideology. But what remains unclear is if being nostalgic for America's past really means being nostalgic for America's white past. We did not measure white identity in study 1, and so white identity's relationship to this nostalgia anti-immigrant association remains unclear. So in study 2, we expand the nostalgia construct to specifically examine racial nostalgia, or longing for a previous status quo for one's white race and ethnicity. And we test whether the link between white identity and support for extremist anti-immigrant policies and white nationalist ideologies can be mediated by this longing for one's racial past. 158 white Americans filled out a survey about identity and racial issues in America. And in this study, we wanted to be a little bit more mindful about the ideology of our sample. MTurk leans liberal, and so we oversampled conservatives. All of our participants completed a 12-item identity measure that